Hey everybody, how's it going? As we all know, Super Smash Bros. Ultimate has an absolutely insane roster. Over the entire series history, Smash has managed to amass a roster featuring so many iconic characters from so many different facets of gaming. It really does a great job of living up to its mantra of everyone is here. But not everyone is here. Now, I'm not about to complain about Smash's roster talking about specific characters that I think we need in order for Smash to be truly complete, but I have been thinking about the Smash roster in terms of overall representation. See, we have fighting game characters, racing characters, characters from RPGs, so many different genres are covered in Smash, and yet there are still so many notable omissions in terms of video game genres that have yet to be represented on the Smash roster. So that's what we're going to tackle here today. I'm going to go through some of the more notable genres in gaming and find characters from these genres that I could absolutely see joining the battle. Before we begin, I gotta lay down some ground rules. Number 1, I'm going to be primarily focusing on third-party franchises for the majority of these genres. However, if there is a Nintendo game that exists in a certain genre, I will give both a Nintendo and third-party character for said genre. Number 2, the character has to originate from the genre that they're representing, so spin-offs don't count. For example, I'm not counting Dr. Mario as a puzzle game rep because even though he comes from a puzzle game, the game is still a spin-off of the Mario franchise. Alright, I think I've made everything clear, so let's get started with our first big genre, the first-person shooter. This is probably the biggest omission from the Smash roster. Now, I do get that there are a bunch of factors as to why this is the case, because let's face it, FPS games are far more popular in the West than they have ever been in Japan. However, despite that, I still think that the first-person shooter is a crucial piece of the gaming landscape as a whole and deserves to be properly represented in Smash. As for the character that I would have repping this genre, I think the two most likely and most wanted picks are Doomslayer and Master Chief. Doomslayer represents the sort of genesis of the genre as a whole. Not to mention he already has a Mii costume in Smash. Now, Master Chief represents what I see as sort of the modern turning point of the genre. Halo transformed both the standard for shooters as well as the standard for multiplayer games in general. I see both these characters having an especially higher chance of getting in due to them both being owned by Microsoft, with Chief essentially being the face of the Xbox platform itself. But I would like to personally throw another character into the ring. A character I don't see as many people talking about for Smash, but still a character with a sizable importance to gaming nonetheless. Gordon Freeman from Half-Life. While Halo modernized the idea of a multiplayer shooter, Half-Life revolutionized the concept as a whole. When Half-Life came out, it was such a huge moment for gaming. Not only was it one of the greatest shooters to ever be released, but it brought about a new era of PC gaming. Half-Life put Valve on the map and is the reason that Steam exists in the first place. Talk about a legacy. So yeah, while I think that Doomguy and Chief would be great shooter reps, I just had to get Gordon's name into the conversation. Up next, we have another big omission that I'm shocked still lacks representation in Smash: rhythm games. It's a genre that has been super popular for a long time and has only grown in popularity over the years, with more and more games in the genre being made. But of course, the main reason I'm shocked that we don't have a rhythm game rep in Smash is because Nintendo has a prominent rhythm game series that is considered by many to be sort of the gold standard for the genre: Rhythm Heaven. This is a series that has existed since the Game Boy Advance, and yet despite many amazing entries over the years, the series still feels somewhat niche even among hardcore Nintendo fans. Now, seemingly, Rhythm Heaven almost had representation on the roster in Smash 4, due to data miners actually finding evidence that the Chorus Kids were likely in development at some point. I don't really know why they got scrapped, to be honest. Maybe it could have been due to time constraints or potentially not being able to make a rhythm mechanic work in Smash at the time. Nonetheless, with how far the roster has come, I could definitely see this idea being revisited in a new Smash title. I think Sakurai could absolutely figure out some way to make them work mechanically as well if he really had to. Now, while a character from Rhythm Heaven would most definitely join the roster before a third-party rhythm character, I still want to entertain the idea, and I have two characters in mind. The first character comes from a rhythm game that now has an established relationship with Nintendo: Cadence from Crypt of the Necrodancer and subsequently Cadence of Hyrule. Both Crypt of the Necrodancer games are extremely fun takes on the rhythm game genre. When Crypt of the Necrodancer first came out, I absolutely fell in love with this game, despite not being super into rhythm games at the time, because the gameplay loop was just that much fun. I think that Cadence would totally fit on the roster. Not to mention, it would be really cool to finally get an indie character in Smash. Now, the second character character that I have comes from a more recent title. Now, I'll preface this by saying this most likely comes from my own personal bias, but I want this character on the roster regardless. That character is Chai from Hi-Fi Rush. Hi-Fi Rush came out of nowhere at the beginning of 2023, and it immediately captured my heart. I downloaded it day one on Game Pass and was immediately hooked. The game has so much charm reminiscent of 2000s Dreamcast and GameCube titles, and the gameplay is insanely polished, taking the standard rhythm game format of performing actions to the beat and combining that with an over-the-top character action game. It proved to be a match made in heaven. Now, I know that Chai is probably very low on the list of possible characters to join the roster, but with how much people love this game alongside the obvious advantage of Microsoft and Nintendo's relationship, I'm not going to dismiss the idea entirely just yet. Moving on from rhythm games, we have the horror genre. Horror games are an incredibly big part of gaming as a whole, and it feels like we're getting really close to having a horror rep join the next Smash title. While we only ended up getting Spirits for Resident Evil and Ultimate, it still feels like a sign of things to come. For a Nintendo horror game rep, I'm going with really the only original horror game that Nintendo has published, and it's a fairly obscure one at that. I'm choosing a character from the GameCube title Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem. Now, Eternal Darkness has a large amount of playable characters throughout the game's story, 12 in fact, but I'm gonna have to go with Pius Augustus. He's the first main character that you play as in the game, and he also ends up becoming the game's central antagonist later on. I feel like he works well as a horror rep over other Eternal Darkness characters like Alexandra, due to him being not only the main villain, but also possessing supernatural abilities. Augustus would be able to use his sword alongside various magic spells, but I think the game's sanity mechanic would need to be incorporated in some way. I could easily see some of his moves giving chip damage or stunning opponents in order to sort of mimic this mechanic. Now, while I don't think that Eternal Darkness would get a rep in Smash, it would still be a super unique concept. So, for a horror rep that I think absolutely has a high chance of getting into Smash, I gotta go with Resident Evil. Being one of the more iconic gaming franchises, as well as being quite possibly the most iconic horror franchise, it's surprising to me that Resident Evil has yet to receive a character in Smash. Now, as for who would represent the series, much like I said for Eternal Darkness, I think that putting an antagonist would feel much more fitting for representing the horror genre. Sure, I think that someone like Leon or Jill would be fun in Smash, but I also think that they would feel more like just generic mercenaries without the zombie stuff to bounce off of, which would quite possibly create some overlap with Snake. Instead, I'm going to go with probably the most well-known antagonist of the series, Albert Wesker. Wesker has military experience much like Jill and Chris, but the big thing that sets him apart from them is that he's infected with a strain of the T-virus, granting him abilities similar to that of the Tyrant enemies in the series. Albert Wesker is an incredibly strong fighter, and I have no doubt that he would be able to hold his own against all the others in Smash, and it would be really cool to get yet another villain added to the roster. Now, I know this next genre isn't for everyone. In fact, I've seen many people actively avoid these types of games as a whole, but you cannot deny that MOBAs have become a mainstay in gaming. In the last 10 years or so, MOBAs have become increasingly popular. They've quickly become one of the most accessible game genres as well due to their increased presence on mobile devices. Now, Nintendo does have a stake in this genre to an extent, with Pokemon Unite being a fairly notable MOBA game, but it's an offshoot of the Pokemon IP. If I was to pick a game to represent MOBAs in Smash, it would come from another game that just so happens to be from the same parent company that helped produce Pokemon Unite. That game is League of Legends. Now, while League isn't the first MOBA to exist, you could argue that it's one of the first to truly garner mainstream appeal. When League first came out in 2009, I would have never imagined that this game would have so much staying power over the years. League of Legends has almost become a household name at this point. Riot has produced multiple in-universe spin-offs over the years, original music groups have spawned from League, and you can't ignore the highly acclaimed animated series Arcane. Love it or hate it, League has truly become an iconic IP at this point, and I think it's inevitable for it to get represented in Smash at some point. As for which character would make it into the roster, there are countless champions to choose from. Of course, you have Jinx and Vi being known amongst even non-League players due to the popularity of Arcane, but then you also have other fan favorites like Lux, Ezreal, and Yasuo too. However, if I was going to pick one character that I think is the most representative of League as a whole, it's gonna have to be Ahri. Now originally I was going to say Teemo due to him being one of the original champs and sort of filling the role of being the de facto series mascot for a while. Ahri has become so prominent in League's marketing as of late. She shows up in a ton of promo material, is a part of League's biggest musical act, and she has a pretty recognizable design to even non-League players. Not to mention, she has a ton of abilities that I think could make for a pretty fun moveset in Smash. Next up, we have none other than the puzzle genre. This is a genre that has always been popular on Nintendo hardware. While we do technically have a big puzzle rep in Smash in the form of Dr. Mario, it's still a spin-off of the Mario IP. I would love to see Smash add a truly original puzzle game rep to the roster. Luckily, there are a decent amount of reps to choose from when it comes to both first and third party. In the case of Nintendo, I think the best character to add would be Lip from Panel to Pawn, or in the West, Tetris Attack. Now, interestingly enough, Lip already has some history in Smash. Alongside having a spirit in Smash Ultimate, she also appears as a Mii sword fighter costume, and her wand has been an item in Smash ever since Melee, commonly known as the Lip Stick. Lip is still a fairly obscure Nintendo character, but considering that this hasn't stopped characters from getting into Smash before, I think that she would be a great first party rep for the genre. Now for third parties. There are a lot of interesting choices and plenty of different subgenres of puzzle games that would all fit into Smash. You could go with a unique puzzle shooter like Portal, or you could go with a fan favorite puzzle adventure game like Professor Layton or the cult classic Ghost Trick, but I think that you're going to have to go with a game that is pretty much synonymous with puzzle games, Tetris. Or in this case, I'm going with specifically Puyo Puyo Tetris. See, Puyo Puyo has already been a popular fan request to join Smash, whereas Tetris is the game that sort of created the block puzzle subgenre in the first place. Because Puyo Puyo Tetris is a crossover game, I think that a character could be added to represent both series simultaneously. The other reason that I'm going with Puyo Puyo Tetris over just regular Tetris is that it allows for a more feasible character, because if I'm going to be real, I don't really see the Tetris pieces themselves getting added to the game. So for what Puyo Puyo character I would add, I think the obvious choice has to be Arl Naja. While there are many protagonists in Puyo Puyo, she is seen by many as the series lead. However, she could easily have alts referencing other characters in the series. As for Arl representing both Puyo Puyo and Tetris at the same time, I don't think that that would be an issue, seeing as some characters in Smash use moves from other characters in their series already that they normally can't use. But with that being said, there's also the potential for an Echo Fighter. That way Smash could have two fighters with roughly the same movesets, but with one using Puyos and the other using Tetrominoes or Tetris pieces. Now let's delve into the world of visual novels, a genre that has been gaining increasing popularity over the years, especially on the Switch as of late. Visual novels are unique in their storytelling, blending intricate narratives with interactive elements. This genre allows for a multitude of stories to be told, from slice of life or even romance to detective mysteries. There's a unique type of storytelling that can really only be achieved by visual novels, and it would be really fun to see a character from this corner of gaming getting represented in Smash. I have two characters in particular that I think would be perfect to fill this role. The first of which is the Nintendo character Ayumi Tachibana from Famicom Detective Club. Ayumi actually has some history with Smash, as she was briefly considered to join Melee. However, Sakurai scrapped this idea because she would not be known to Western audiences. Nonetheless, the Famicom Detective Club games were remade for the Nintendo Switch in 2021, and so the games have gained a newfound audience. I still don't think that Ayumi's chances of joining Smash are necessarily high, but I still think if she were to join the roster, it would definitely be a welcome addition. But the character from visual novels that I really want to join the roster comes from third party, Phoenix Wright, the Ace Attorney himself. Phoenix has been one of my most wanted characters to join Smash for a pretty long time, and I know that I'm not alone in that sentiment. I absolutely adore the Ace Attorney series, and I already love playing as him in Marvel vs. Capcom, so having him join another fighting game feels like a no-brainer. In fact, I pretty much see Ace Attorney as a Nintendo franchise at this point. The main series is pretty much console exclusive to Nintendo. The only time that it's made the jump over to PlayStation and Xbox has been in the form of compilation games. For me personally, Phoenix is an icon of Nintendo's handhelds, and I think that his inclusion in Smash is long overdue. Alright, so the last big genre that I want to talk about is a pretty big one, and I think it's one that has permanently altered gaming as a whole, the MMORPG. This is a genre that has existed for a pretty long time, and it feels like the majority of the bigger publishers have at least one in their catalog at this point. However, there's one MMO in particular that took the world by storm, and has seriously cemented itself as one of the most iconic iconic video games of all time, World of Warcraft. Now, while this game may not have much of an audience in Japan, its importance in gaming culture as a whole is still something that I think needs to be recognized. Now, you could also argue that I'm sort of going against my own guidelines since World of Warcraft comes from the already existing Warcraft series, but here's the thing, WoW pretty much is the series at this point, and including a World of Warcraft rep would also allow for an RTS character to join the roster due to the nature of the original Warcraft games. So who exactly do we pick for a character to represent Warcraft as a whole? I could go with an iconic character like Arthas or Illidan Stormrage, but I'd rather pick a character that represents one of the main two factions, the Alliance and the Horde. On the Alliance side, we of course have Anduin, but I honestly think that it would be a bit boring to include a human character from a series like Warcraft. So instead, I'm choosing one of the Horde war chiefs, Thrall. Thrall is one of the main protagonists of World of Warcraft and has been a part of the series as a whole since its very beginnings. His appearance is one that would absolutely stand out, and with Doomhammer in his possession, he would definitely diversify the playstyle on the roster. So before I wrap up, I do want to touch on a couple interesting genres briefly. Now, I say genres, but they kind of fall into a weird category. They're more umbrella genres, I guess, roguelike and battle royale. Now, I originally wasn't going to talk about these, but they're so prominent in gaming right now that I feel like a rep from one of these types of games is going to come to Smash at some point. The thing with roguelikes and battle royales is they can be applied to anything. Any genre can become a roguelike. Any genre can become a battle royale, but there are still distinct games from those categories that have risen to immense popularity over the years. Let's start with roguelike, because you have so many options to choose from. You have Risk of Rain, Into the Breach, Rogue Legacy, Darkest Dungeon, The Binding of Isaac, Dead Cells, Enter the Gungeon, Slay the Spire. There's so many choices to choose from. Each of these games are really solid experiences, but if I was to pick a character from a roguelike game to get into Smash, it's gonna have to be Zagreus from Hades. Now, I get that that could be a little bit of recency bias, but Hades is genuinely an insanely good game, and it took the Nintendo Switch by storm. Not to mention, Hades already has spirits in Smash Ultimate. I feel like not too many games that aren't Nintendo or major third party have that honor. Like, Hades is still an indie game, and yet it's treated as if it came from one of these major publishers. And of course, with Hades 2 on the horizon, I don't think that the game's relevancy is going anywhere anytime soon. Next up, we got Battle Royale. Once again, another category with a lot of games to choose from. Nintendo even has plenty of their own with the 99 series. Kirby's Dream Buffet is even a battle royale of sort. And on the third-party side of things, there are still plenty of options to choose from. You have Call of Duty Warzone, Apex Legends, Fall Guys. But if you truly want to represent the genre for everything that it is, I think there's only one true option you can go with. It's gotta be Fortnite. Jonesy getting into Smash feels like an inevitability at this point. The game has been out for, 7 years now, and it's still going strong. Now, I know that there's been stuff that came out recently about Nintendo and Epic maybe not playing nice with Nintendo characters getting into Fortnite and whatnot, but I don't think that that would stand in the way from a character from one of the most popular games on the planet right now from entering the fray in Super Smash Bros. It might seem like a bit of a pipe dream to a lot of people, but hey, I thought the exact same thing about Steve from Minecraft getting into Smash, and look where we are now. At the end of the day, however, Smash is the ultimate celebration of all things gaming. Whether you like some of those things or hate some of those things, Smash is a way to bring together every corner of gaming into one place. And I know there are plenty of genres and subgenres that I didn't really cover in this video, and who knows, maybe I'll do a part 2 in the future, but for now, this was just kind of me getting at least some ideas out there as to where Smash could go in the future, and I'm sure that you guys have your own ideas. So if there are certain genres and certain characters that you would love to see repped in Smash, leave your comments down below, and I mean, maybe I'll include some of those in a part 2. But for now, I think that is enough out of me. So if you guys like this video, feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you all in the next video. Later.